Two starving German shepherd puppies huddled in a dark alley, their fur caked with ice, their breaths growing fainter with every passing moment. They were cast aside, utterly forgotten, abandoned to perish under the relentless blanketing snow. And miles away, a Navy SEAL navigated that very same storm, haunted by more ghosts than a man could ever count. He wasn't searching for a soul. He had no intention of being a hero. Yet when he saw those two fragile lives shivering beside a rusted trash bin, something deep inside him stirred. The soldier, the protector, the man who once believed in miracles was reborn. What happened next will prove that even in the harshest winter, love will always find its way home. Before we start, let me know where you're watching from. Share your country in the comments down below. The winter storm came early that year, a white avalanche pouring from the Rockies, threatening to consume the small Colorado town of Brookhaven. Clear's throat. The streets were almost completely abandoned, swallowed by drifting snow, while lamplight flickered weakly through the haze like fading halos. The air itself was a blade sharp enough to burn the lungs, the kind of cold that worked its way right into your bones. Somewhere in that hushed, frozen landscape, it felt as if life itself had paused, holding its very breath. Logan Hayes' knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel, his pickup crawling down Main Street, the wipers fighting a losing battle with the wall of snow. He had no destination. He was just driving. Inside the cab, the silence was a heavy, suffocating weight, pierced only by the engine's low drone and the heater's strained whisper, a battle it was clearly losing. 38 years old, a Navy SEAL. Since his early 20s, Logan carried his strength like a shield, but wore his silence like an open wound. His dark hair, cut short and streaked with premature gray, framed a face etched with the harsh lines of war and profound loss. His steel blue eyes held the far-off gaze of a man who'd witnessed too much and had learned to say almost nothing at all. He'd been driving for days ever since he left the base. They called it extended leave, but Logan knew the truth. He wasn't going home. He was running from the ghosts that waited in every quiet room, the ones that haunted every single dream. His mind flashed with visions he fought to forget, endless sand-choking smoke, and the face of the friend he'd been forced to leave behind. At least the road never asked any questions. But as the snowfall intensified, Logan eased his foot off the gas, pulling onto a side street next to a small local grocery store. Above, a sign for Dale's Market sputtered with dying neon, while a lone lamppost hummed its weak light, shivering in the storm. As he stepped from the truck, the wind sliced through his navy coat like a razor. The air was thick with the smell of cold steel and damp asphalt. While reaching into his pocket to pull on his gloves, a faint sound carried on the wind, so faint the storm nearly consumed it. A whimper. Logan froze. That wasn't a human sound. It was something smaller, weaker, more desperate. His gaze shifted to the alley beside the market, a tight passage between two brick buildings where snow drifted high and the wind wailed like a caged beast. Pure instinct drove him forward. The SEAL inside him took over before the man could think. He moved cautiously through the deep snow. His eyes swept the shadows. Then, behind a rusted dumpster and splintered wooden crate, a flicker of movement caught his gaze. He dropped into a crouch, his breath catching in his throat. Inside the crate, two tiny German shepherd puppies were huddled together, their fur matted and clinging to small, trembling frames. Through the soaked fur, the sharp lines of their ribs were agonizingly clear. Every shallow breath was a visible fight. One pup managed to lift its head, its eyes hazed over with a desperate mix of hunger and fear, and it feebly tried to lick the snowflakes melting on its nose. The other remained motionless, its only sign of life, a violent shiver against its sibling, desperately seeking warmth from a body that had none left to share. A knot of ice formed in Logan's chest. He'd seen death before, on the battlefield among soldiers and civilians beside his brothers. But this quiet, fragile suffering struck a different chord. There was no reason for these two to be here. No justification that could ever make this right. They wouldn't make it through the night. He knelt closer, his voice a low whisper. "Hey, easy now?" His breath plumed in the frigid air. "I've got you." The smaller one whimpered at the sound, too frail to even try to flee. Logan reached into the crate, his bare hands ignoring the sharp bite of the cold. The moment his fingers brushed their fur, the chilling cold of their bodies sent a jolt through him, and he swore under his breath. They felt like nothing in his hands, as fragile as new ice. "It's okay," he murmured, gathering them both into his arms. He could feel the frantic, desperate drumming of their tiny hearts against his own chest, and for just a second he felt it, that stubborn spark of life, fragile, but refusing to be extinguished. Just then, a voice cut through the howling wind. "Sir, is someone there?" Logan's head snapped up. A figure stood silhouetted at the mouth of the alley, framed by the flickering street lamp. A young woman holding a white cane, her long gray coat whipped around her in the wind, and wisps of chestnut hair escaped from under her knitted cap. Her face seemed delicate, almost as fragile as the lives he now held, with that pale luminosity of someone who doesn't see the sun often. Her eyes were open, but they were looking past him, unfocused, a cloudy, searching gray. She couldn't see him. "I heard crying," she said, her voice soft but clear, carrying a warmth that defied the biting cold around them. It sounded like someone was hurting. Logan's first instinct was pure caution. He wasn't used to strangers, especially not one with a gentle voice in a place like this. "2 puppies," he said, his voice rough. "They're freezing to death." The woman took a hesitant step forward, her cane tapping the fresh snow. "Are they alive?" she asked, her own voice trembling now. "For now," he answered quietly. "Barely." A faint, shaky sigh escaped her lips. "Thank God." After a moment, she added, "I work at the animal rescue down the street. I'm Emma Brooks." A faint smile touched her lips, though they were pale from the bitter cold. "I guess I move a little slower than most people. It helps me hear things other people miss." "Logan," he said, his tone clipped. "Logan Hayes." Her brow furrowed for a second. "That's a soldier's voice." He hesitated for a beat. "Navy SEAL." "I thought so," she whispered, as if confirming a private suspicion. "Funny, isn't it? You come home from one war just to find another battlefield. Only this one's smaller." Logan looked down at the 2 small bodies pressed weakly against his chest. "Yeah," he muttered. "Seems the world is full of them." Guided only by his voice, Emma took another step towards the sound. Her cane tapped softly against the snow near his boot. "If you can get them to the shelter, I could call the vet. Find them blankets, some formula, anything warm." He just shook his head, a silent refusal. "Not tonight," he said, his voice low against the wind. "The roads are already closing up. You need to get inside before this storm really hits." Emma tilted her head, listening not to the words but to the unshakable resolve beneath them. "You sound like a man who knows his way through a storm," she observed quietly. He offered no reply. His arms instinctively tightened around the puppies, a human shield against the biting wind. The trembling had finally stopped, their little faces nestled deep into the fabric of his coat. Emma drew a quiet breath. "Still, thank you for stopping for them. Most people would have just walked on by." Logan truly looked at her, then a woman standing alone in the blizzard, sightless, yet utterly fearless. Her voice was a small pocket of warmth in the frozen air, and for a reason he couldn't grasp, something deep inside him began to thaw. Perhaps it was the certainty in her tone, a beacon in the perpetual darkness she inhabited. Or maybe it was because he hadn't felt truly seen in years, not even by those with perfect sight. "I don't know why I stopped," he admitted, his voice rough. "Figured they had no one else?" "Or maybe," Emma said softly, "you both needed someone." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Just then, a savage gust of wind howled down the alley, blasting a vortex of snow into the air. Emma turned her face into it, her braid lashing against her cheek. You need to go, she urged, her voice still gentle. Get them warm. There's an old cabin just past the gas station, always empty this time of year. You'll be safe there. He nodded, a gesture she couldn't see but somehow felt. Thank you. Be safe, Logan Hayes, she replied, her voice a quiet anchor in the gale. And watch over them. Sometimes saving something small is God's way of reminding us we're still alive. Logan remained frozen for a heartbeat, her words echoing like a newfound warmth in his soul. Then he carefully shifted the puppies, tucking them deeper inside his navy coat. He could feel their fragile bodies against his chest, their faint heartbeats like tiny, hopeful drums. With a renewed sense of purpose, he turned toward the street, the fresh snow crying out under the weight of his boots. Emma stayed at the mouth of the alley, her white cane a steady post in the gathering drifts, her face tilted up to the endless fall of snow, and though her eyes saw nothing, it was as if she could feel everything that was unfolding. That sacred moment when something small and precious was pulled back from the brink. As Logan stepped from the alley into the heart of the storm, the two tiny lives held securely in his coat, he cast one last look back. The alley's lamplight fell upon Emma's face, serene, strangely peaceful, as if she were glowing from within the swirling snow. And for the first time in an age, he allowed himself to feel it. Hope? The snow fell a cold and relentless curtain, but somewhere in that vast white silence a single spark had ignited, small, fragile but fiercely burning. Logan walked on the storm, sealing the world behind him, carrying two tiny lives against the beat of his own heart. And Emma remained a statue in the snow, her face aimed toward the heavens, feeling that distant, sacred warmth, like a small candle flickering against the vast, cold night. The wind had not surrendered its fury by the time Logan reached the forest's edge. The only road out of Brookhaven was a treacherous ribbon winding through a valley of pines, their branches groaning under the weight of the heavy snow, a hushed whisper beneath the storm's fury. His headlights carved two lonely paths through the oppressive dark, finally catching a weathered wooden sign, Maple Hollow Cabins. Just one cabin stood defiant, its roof, whole its chimney, a straight spine against the sky. The others were mere skeletons of better winters. He pulled up beside the lone survivor, its porch drowning in snow, and cut the engine. The silence that rushed in was absolute, a crushing weight, the kind that steals the air from your lungs. For a heavy moment, Logan remained perfectly still, hearing only the two desperate whimpers from beneath his coat. Then he forced the door open and stepped into the gale, the cold a razor's edge against his boots. The pups shifted weakly, one letting out a fragile cry. "Just hold on," he murmured, pulling his coat tighter to shield them. "We're almost there." The cabin door groaned in protest, finally giving way. The air inside was a ghost of stale breath and dust, but there a stone fireplace with a promise of warmth and a stack of old wood. And for now, that was everything. Logan kicked the door shut against the storm and laid the pups gently on a threadbare blanket by the hearth before getting to work. His hands moved with a practiced, methodical grace, the same unwavering rhythm he'd used to spark life in war zones, jungles, and deserts. Anywhere survival was the only law. Soon, the first defiant flames licked the kindling, casting dancing shadows across the cabin's fractured walls. The puppies stirred, inching toward the growing heat. Their fur was matted and cold, their small bellies hollow with hunger. Logan knelt beside them, his rough palms rubbing their tiny sides, willing the warmth back into them until their shivering began to subside. "There you go," he whispered, his voice a low rumble. "That's better." He reached into his pack, pulling out the last of his ration bars. High-protein, tasteless sustenance that was the difference between life and death. He broke off small pieces between his fingers, softening them with warm water from his canteen, and held them out. The larger pup, the one who'd lifted its head before, hesitantly sniffed his offering before tentatively licking his hand. But the smaller one only whimpered, too weak to even try. Logan's throat constricted. He gently placed a hand on the tiny creature's chest, feeling the fragile, fluttering pulse of its heart. "Oh, you're not giving up on me," he vowed softly. "Not tonight." Outside, the storm raged, throwing its fury against the cabin walls. The old timbers of the cabin groaned under the assault, but inside the fire burned brighter, pushing back the gloom with its orange light. For the first time in years, Logan felt a flicker of peace in something so simple: the crackle of wood, the quiet rhythm of breathing, the faint, hopeful sounds of life returning to the world. He leaned his tired frame back against the wall, letting the bone-deep exhaustion settle in. He studied the two pups. The larger one was brave, his eyes alert despite his weakness. He had dark amber eyes and a small nick in his ear, as if the world had already tried and failed to break him. The smaller one, with lighter fur and a timid spirit, wore a white patch on its chest like a fading star. "You look like you're trouble," he said to the bolder pup. "And you?" He gazed at the timid one. "You're the kind who'll follow your heart no matter how much it hurts." A faint smile, a rare and foreign expression on his face, touched his lips. "Buddy," he said, nodding to the stronger of the two. "And you'll be Scout." The names felt right one to lead the other to learn. The two puppies lifted their heads at the sound of his voice, and in that quiet moment it was as if they already knew. The firelight flickered and danced across the framed photos on the cabin wall. Faded pictures of a family long since past. A man and a woman holding a small child bathed in the glow of a summer sun. The mountains behind them were alive with color. Logan stared at the image for a long time, his jaw hardening. It was a phantom of a photograph he once treasured. A younger him standing beside his brother before deployment, both of them smiling like fools who didn't yet know what war could steal. The memory burned. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing it down. When he opened them again, Buddy was unsteadily on his paws, shuffling closer to his boot. The pup leaned against his leg, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Logan reached down his fingers, gently scratching behind the pup's ears. "Yeah," he murmured. "You're safe now." Scout, still nestled by the fire, let out a soft sigh. Logan pulled the blanket higher over the smaller dog and nudged a log in the hearth. Hours slipped by. The storm outside calmed to a whisper. A deep warmth began to settle into the old cabin, its shadows softening. Logan sat in the wooden chair beside the flames, watching the two puppies sleep. The smell of burning pine filled the room, mingling with the faint, earthy scent of damp fur. For the first time since he'd left the base, the silence wasn't haunting him. The space felt alive, gentle, filled with the soft rhythm of breathing that was not his own. His thoughts drifted to the young woman from the alley, Emma Brooks. He could still hear her voice cutting through the wind, so steady and kind. Sometimes saving something small is how God reminds us we are still alive. She had said it so simply, but the words stuck with him like a scripture. He wondered what kind of life she must live. A young blind woman working at an animal shelter, walking home alone in the snow, because she heard a cry that everyone else ignored. It was a brand of courage that didn't require a uniform. Logan rubbed his chilled hands together, staring into the flames. "You'd like her," he said softly to the sleeping pups. "She'd probably call you two little miracles." His voice held a fragile balance of warmth and ache. He walked to the small window and gazed out. The snow had stopped. The forest stretched vast and silent under the moon's pale light, every single branch draped in a delicate layer of frost. It was beautiful, a fragile masterpiece that demanded reverence. He hadn't looked at the world this way in years. He hadn't seen beauty without bracing for it to be ripped away. Maybe this is what coming home was supposed to mean. The next morning back in town, Emma Brooks arrived at the doors of the Animal Rescue Center, a small brick building painted a faded, hopeful yellow. Inside, the air smelled of clean floors and fresh hay. The director, Mrs. Clark, was a sturdy woman in her 50s, with a storm of curly gray hair and a gentle face lined with years of compassion. She greeted Emma with her usual warm, gravelly voice. You're an early sweetheart. I didn't expect you after last night's blizzard. Emma offered a faint smile, placing her cane near the door. I couldn't sleep. I just kept hearing that little cry in my head. The one from the alley. Mrs. Clark sighed, adjusting her glasses on her nose. The sheriff got a call this morning. Said someone saw a man carrying 2 pups out of there last night. A big guy. The soldierly figure steered his truck down the forest road. A gasp escaped Emma's lips. He actually saved them. Looks that way, Mrs. Clark remarked. Those poor little souls. So lucky he showed up. Emma pressed her fingertips together, lost in thought. Will he bring them here, you think? Maybe, the woman said with a casual shrug. Then again, maybe not. Men like that, soldiers, they're not known for sticking around. Emma turned her gaze fixed on the shelter's humming heater. Her expression grew distant. Still, she whispered, I really hope I see him again. He sounded like someone who needed saving himself. Miles away inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly. Logan stirred from his chair, his body stiff and sore, but finally warm for the first time in weeks. Buddy was curled by his boots as Scout slept on his lap, tucked under a blanket. He watched the flames dance and whispered barely audibly, Maybe saving them was God's way of saving me. The words escaped him a truth he hadn't known he held. Outside, the snow shimmered in the pale morning light, and from deep in the woods a lone bird began to sing. It was the first note of a thaw not yet arrived, but promised. The sun crested the Colorado mountain ridges pale and hesitant. It bathed the world in a fragile shimmer of white and gold. Sometime overnight, the raging storm had surrendered to silence. The forest surrounding the cabin was cloaked in snow so pristine and bright that it almost glowed. Logan Hayes stood at the small window, steam rising from the tin mug in his hand. The fire had dwindled to embers, leaving just enough warmth to fill the room. By the hearth, Buddy and Scout were still fast asleep, their small forms huddled together beneath an old wool blanket. The cadence of their breathing was a quiet, hopeful melody in the stillness. Logan took a slow sip of his coffee, his gaze fixed on them. It was jarring how fast something could begin to matter so much. He had spent years in places where nothing soft could survive. Deserts, jungles, the heart of war zones, where any hint of tenderness was a fatal liability. And yet here he was, consumed with worry for 2 creatures that weighed less than his gear. He knelt beside them, gently scratching behind Buddy's ear. The little pup's eyes opened amber pools of pure curiosity, while Scout let out a soft whimper, still lost in sleep. Time to get you to a vet, Logan murmured to them. You 2 need more than ration bars. A rare smile touched his lips, his voice thick with a warmth he hadn't known in years. By mid-morning, he had the pups bundled securely in a thick wool blanket, placing them gently on the passenger seat of his truck. The drive back to Brookhaven was a slow, careful crawl. Snow still clung to the road, the truck's tires crunching with every deliberate turn. Wisps of smoke curled from chimneys across town. The streets now lined with deep snow drifts and melting slush, but life was stirring once more. Shop signs lit shovels, scraped laughter drifted from a nearby cafe. The vet's office was on the corner of Maple and Birch, right beside that animal rescue center Emma had mentioned. It was a humble brick building, its faded sign reading, Brookhaven Animal Care. Logan parked by the door and carried his precious cargo inside. A small bell over the door chimed, and the air smelled clean, a mix of antiseptic and pine soap. The woman at the counter looked up from her files. She was in her 40s with short, silver-streaked blonde hair. Her green eyes were kind, but her steady calm spoke of endless days and far too little sleep. Her name tag identified her as Dr. Sarah Whitfield, dressed in navy blue scrubs and a fleece vest, her sleeves already rolled to her elbows. A faint white scar traced a line along her wrist, a silent story of a long-healed wound. "Morning," she greeted, her voice calm. "Looks like you've brought me some trouble." "2 of them," Logan replied, his voice low as he gently parted the blanket. A tiny head stirred, blinking against the sudden light, and every trace of weariness vanished from Sarah's face. "Oh, you poor little things," she said, her voice dropping to a soft, maternal whisper. "Where on earth did you find them?" "In an alley behind Dale's Market," he answered. "Last night's storm, they wouldn't have made it." Sarah nodded, her professional demeanor cracking as emotion filled her eyes. "You absolutely did the right thing bringing them in. Let's see what we're dealing with." She led him toward the sterile light of the examination table. Her movements were swift, yet impossibly gentle. Logan watched, noticing how her voice softened into a practiced, reassuring murmur whenever she spoke to them. With practiced hands, she checked their temperature, their tiny pulses, and the fragile state of their hydration, then prepared 2 small syringes of vitamins and fluids. "Malnourished, but they're fighters," she said at last. "With food and care, they're going to make it." Logan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, a wave of relief washing over him. "Good," he murmured. Sarah glanced up at him, her gaze holding his for just a moment too long. "Are you military?" she asked softly. He simply nodded. "Navy SEAL." "That explains the eyes," she observed. "You've seen too much of the world, yet you still notice the smallest creatures. That's rare." Logan was at a loss for words. Instead, he focused on Buddy stroking the small pup who was now eagerly licking his fingers. Just then, the gentle swing of the door connecting to the main rescue center announced a new arrival. Emma Brooks entered her white cane, tapping a soft rhythm ahead of her. The cold had painted her cheeks a soft pink, and her wavy chestnut hair was loosely pulled back. A cream-colored scarf stood out against her dark coat, and though her steps were small, they were filled with an unwavering confidence. The cane tapped rhythmically, as if she were reading the entire room through sound alone. "Emma," Sarah said with a warm smile, "your timing is perfect. I was just about to have you grab some more blankets from the shelter." A faint smile touched Emma's lips. "I thought I heard voices I didn't recognize." She turned her head, orienting herself perfectly in Logan's direction, her head tilted, listening intently. Logan cleared his throat. "We met last night," he said, his voice gentle. Her expression instantly lit up with recognition. "The soldier from the alley," she said, a warmth in her tone. "I knew I recognized that voice." She moved forward slowly, drawn by the sound of Buddy's soft whimpers. "And these must be the little survivors, Buddy and Scout," Logan added almost shyly. "It's what I've been calling them." Emma knelt down beside the examination table, her hands reaching out with a careful, questioning grace. "May I?" she asked. He nodded, forgetting for a moment she couldn't see it. "Of course, go ahead." Her fingertips traced the fragile bones of Buddy's head with an incredible gentleness, then moved to feel the soft curve of his ear before finding Scout's chest, and the small patch of white fur that felt like a tiny star against his heart. Her touch was delicate, almost reverent. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "They feel so grateful," she added. "You can always feel when a soul decides to trust you." Logan watched, mesmerized by the certainty in her hands, which were guided by an instinct far deeper than sight. "You can really feel that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Emma smiled, her gaze turning toward the sound of his voice. "Because sometimes kindness isn't something you see. It's a presence you feel, a warmth in the very air." For that one moment, the biting cold and the noise of the world vanished for Logan. All that remained was her voice, gentle yet unyielding, and the fragile warmth of 2 tiny lives breathing between them. It was as if the room itself held its breath, suspended in time. Dr. Sarah quietly closed her chart, stepping back to give them space, a silent guardian of this unexpected peace. "They'll need constant care for a few weeks," she explained softly. "Tests, warmth, and feeding every couple of hours. You can bring them back for checkups." "I've got it," Logan said without hesitation. Emma tilted her head. "So, they're yours to keep. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, followed by the faintest smile. "Seems like they've already made that decision for me." Emma's soft laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle snow. "Then they're the lucky ones." Just outside the clinic's door, the snow had finally begun to surrender to a pale winter sun. Through the glass, Logan saw the reflection of two women, one a pillar of strength, the other a quiet, radiant light. And he realized just how long it had been since he'd been surrounded by such simple gentleness. It was a world he'd almost forgotten, an unfamiliar peace he found he desperately didn't want to leave. Meanwhile, across town, another man sat in a cramped apartment above a derelict hardware store. His name was Benny Cruz. In his late 50s, Benny's face was a roadmap of faded arrogance and fresh regret, his gray stubble framing a mouth set in bitter lines. His eyes were dark pools hollowed out by endless sleepless nights. He was utterly alone. He was surviving on cheap whiskey and the hollow noise from a small TV until the morning news spoke of a Navy SEAL rescuing 2 German Shepherd puppies from behind Dale's Market. His hand froze mid-drink. He knew that alley. He knew it all too well. He knew those dogs. Benny had discovered them weeks ago, strays born in the shadows behind his own building. He'd fed them what little he had until the biting cold and his empty pockets became too much. One night, lost in a drunken rage, he told himself he couldn't carry their weight too, so he left them by the store's cold dumpster, clinging to the lie that someone else, someone better, would surely find them. But no one had. Not until now. As the reporter's voice faded, Benny slammed the power button, killing the light. His own ghostly reflection stared back from the dark screen. The whiskey burned, but for the first time in years, guilt didn't just visit him. It took up residence. Back in the warmth of the clinic, Logan helped Emma button her coat, a simple protective gesture that surprised them both. She smiled at his touch. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved them, Logan. Maybe more than you can ever know." He looked down at Buddy, whose tail managed a faint, hopeful wag from his arms, as Scout burrowed deeper against his chest. "Maybe," he murmured. As Emma turned to leave, she paused at the door. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." Though she couldn't see him, her eyes lifted toward his, and they held a deep, unnerving wisdom. "You rescued them," she said softly. "But who's going to rescue you?" The question hung in the air, and Logan had no answer for it. He looked past her, out the frosted window, where the sun shattered like diamonds across the snow-blanketed rooftops. Far in the distance, a faint light shimmered off the roof of a lone cabin. It was a small, almost invisible gleam against the vast, cold morning. He held his gaze on it for a long moment. His next words, a whisper, meant only for himself. Perhaps it had already begun. Darkness fell upon Brookhaven like a heavy blanket, the kind of hushed winter night where every sound echoed with startling clarity. The mournful groan of wind-tossed trees, the sharp crackle of the hearth fire, the gentle rhythm of the dogs breathing softly beside it. The blizzard had surrendered, leaving a profound stillness in its wake, a silence that felt almost sacred. Moonlight spilled over the snow like liquid silver, a pale, flawless canvas. Inside, Logan was settled in a worn armchair near the fire, a book resting open on his lap, though he hadn't turned a single page in over an hour. The fire's dancing light flickered in the depths of his blue eyes as his thoughts drifted to worlds far beyond this small cabin Iraqi sandstorms, the endless dark of the ocean, the faces of men who never came back. But tonight his ghosts were mercifully quiet. Buddy and Scout were the reason. The 2 pups were growing stronger with each passing day. Buddy, the bolder of the 2, now trotted with the awkward certainty of a toddler who's just discovered his own 2 feet. His once dull coat now gleamed amber and black in the firelight. Scout, ever the smaller and more hesitant one, found his comfort curled against Logan's leg, his small head resting on the worn cuff of the man's flannel shirt. They had started to know the sound of his voice, their tails thumping a happy rhythm whenever he spoke. "You 2 have no idea what you've done for me. He whispered a rare smile, touching his lips as he closed the book. "You finally made this place feel like a home again." A sudden faint noise snapped his attention upward. A low growl, barely a whisper, rumbled from Buddy's chest. The puppy was on his feet, staring intently at the door, his ears twitching nervously. "What's wrong, boy?" Logan asked in a hushed tone. He rose the floorboards, groaning under the weight of his boots. Buddy's tail went rigid. A heartbeat later, another sound cut through the silence, faint but unmistakable. A footstep, the crunch of snow just beyond the porch. Logan moved with a silent grace to the window. The thick frost on the pane had grown, blurring the outside world into a swirl of shadow and light. Through it, he could barely discern a figure moving along the fence line, slowly, hesitantly. Not the gait of someone with purpose, but of someone who was utterly broken. He placed the book down, grabbed his heavy coat, and stepped into the biting cold. The frigid night air seared his lungs sharp and unforgiving. The snow beneath his boots whispered with each deliberate step. The moon hung low and heavy in the sky, casting long spectral shadows across the yard. When he finally reached the fence line, there was nothing but the wind's cold breath and the silence, until his eyes fell upon it. A folded piece of paper pinned to a wooden post and weighted down by a small, smooth stone. He took it carefully. The handwriting was unsteady and uneven, as if written by a trembling hand. "Forgive me. They deserved so much better. I didn't know how to save them, or myself." Logan stood frozen, the words piercing him deeper than the bitter cold ever could. He glanced down, seeing a lone set of footprints leading away from the fence. They were uneven, 1 foot, dragging slightly in the deep snow. Whoever left this note had walked away slowly, like a soul burdened by a weight too heavy to ever set down. He didn't need a name. In his heart, he already knew who it was. Benny Cruz. Logan breathed into the cold air. He remembered Dr. Sarah mentioning the name at the clinic just that morning. The man was living above the old downtown hardware store, right near the very alley where he'd found the pups. She had said he used to take in strays, a good man, before the bottle had carved out everything that he was. Logan carefully folded the note, securing it in his coat pocket, as his eyes drifted toward the desolate road. Somewhere out there, he knew a man was wrestling with a mistake that still tore at his very soul. Inside the cabin, the fire blazed brighter upon his return. Buddy trotted faithfully behind his tail, wagging to chase away the deep chill. Scout, nestled by the chair, lifted a sleepy head. Logan knelt his hands, finding comfort in stroking them both. "Looks like someone's finally asking for forgiveness," he murmured, adding quietly, "Guess he finally worked up the courage." Later, as evening settled in, a soft knock echoed through the cabin. Logan paused. Visitors were a true rarity out here. When he opened the door, Emma Brooke stood on his porch, bundled in a heavy winter coat and scarf snowflakes clinging like crystals to her hair. The biting cold had flushed her cheeks a soft pink. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, her cane tapping softly on the porch. "Dr. Sarah mentioned you lived up near the ridge. I brought something for the pups, and maybe for you as well." A rare smile touched Logan's lips as he stepped aside. "You walked all this way." "Half of it," she admitted. "A kind man with a snowplow offered me a ride." He took her coat gently, guiding her to a chair beside the fire. Her hands reached out, searching for its comforting warmth. Her fingers uncurled as the heat seeped into them. "It smells of pine and wood smoke," she murmured. "It feels so peaceful." "Peaceful is something I don't get much of," Logan confessed, handing her a warm mug of tea. She offered a soft laugh in return. "Me neither, unless I'm with animals. They don't pass judgment, you know. They just are. A lot like forgiveness," he mused, sitting across from her, studying her face in the flickering firelight. Her features held a delicate strength, a testament to her resilience. A faint scar marked her jawline, a ghost in the dancing shadows. "How long have you been at the shelter?" he asked gently. "Ever since I lost my sight." She answered, her tone simple and direct. Logan hesitated for a moment. "How did it happen?" "A car accident," she replied, her voice steady. "I was 21 studying music. I was driving home late one night after a concert. Another driver fell asleep. I woke up to a world of darkness and the light never returned. At first I thought it was a curse," she said, a faint, knowing smile on her lips. "But I realized my world hadn't ended. It just changed its shape. The light I lost with my eyes, I found again in my heart. It helps me see people differently, sometimes even more clearly than before." A profound respect softened Logan's hardened gaze. "That's one hell of a way to look at it," he admitted. Emma chuckled. "It's the only way I know." She tilted her head as if sensing his thoughts. "You've seen your own share of darkness, haven't you? The kind of things that make you stop believing." He was silent for a long moment. The fire crackled, sending a single spark upward. "Yeah," he finally breathed. "Far too many." Emma reached out toward the sound of his voice, her hand gently finding his arm. "Then maybe it's time you let yourself see something good again." As if on cue, Buddy let out a soft bark, his tail thumping, while Scout nudged his head gently against Emma's leg. A warm smile spread across her face as she stroked their fur. "See? Even they agree?" A genuine laugh escaped Logan, surprising him with its sound. It was a sound so real it startled him. "You're good at this," he said. "At what?" she asked. "Making the world feel a little less heavy." Emma tilted her head thoughtfully. "Maybe that's what this world needs. Fewer people fighting wars and more people willing to sit by a fire and listen." He leaned back, the weight of her words settling in. "Maybe you're right." When she left later that night, he walked her to the edge of the road. The snow had begun to fall again, soft, silent flakes drifting down like forgotten memories. Before she climbed into the waiting plow truck, Emma turned to face him. "I heard something different in your voice tonight," she said softly. "You sound lighter." "Maybe I am," he admitted, a trace of a smile on his lips. "For the first time in a very long time." Back inside, Logan closed the door and gazed down at the puppies curled together on their blanket. The firelight flickered across their fur, casting long, gentle shadows that danced upon the floorboards. He unfolded the note again, his eyes tracing the desperate, trembling words in the dim lamplight. Forgiveness, regret, a chance at redemption. He set it on the table beside the old photo of strangers who once called this cabin home, and whispered, "Maybe we all deserve another chance." He knelt by the pups, carefully adjusting the worn blanket around their sleeping forms. "It all started with you two, huh?" he murmured into the quiet. "Maybe that's how God brings us back, through creatures that can't even speak." The cabin was steeped in a profound silence, punctuated only by the steady crackle of the fire. Logan leaned back, watching Buddy and Scout's chests rise and fall in unison. Two small, fragile heartbeats in the vast, overwhelming quiet. Outside, the falling snow was erasing Benny Cruz's footprints, making the world look pure and clean again. And Logan, staring into the flames, thought, maybe God uses the smallest things to lead broken men home. That evening, the sky surrendered to a darkness that felt far too early. The kind of oppressive dark that doesn't fall, but descends. Heavy, bruised clouds rolled in from the north, pressing down low over the ridges and completely swallowing the faint glow of the moon. Logan stood at the window of the cabin, a mug of black coffee warming his hands, and watched the wind bend the treetops like they were nothing more than fragile stalks. The storm was building again, stronger and angrier this time. He could feel it in the air, that charged electric stillness right before the chaos breaks loose. Inside, the fire cast a soft glow, painting the rough-hewn walls in hues of gold and amber. Buddy and Scout were curled up near the hearth, their bellies round and full, now their coats growing in thick and glossy. Scout's tail twitched in a dream, while Buddy, ever the guardian, occasionally lifted his head, always alert. The faint crunch of tires on snow pulled Logan from his thoughts. Through the swirling, hypnotic curtain of white outside, a pair of headlights cut through the gloom, weaving slowly up the narrow, treacherous path toward his cabin. He frowned, setting his mug down. Not many people dared this mountain road after dark. A moment later, a knock came at the door, firm but somehow hesitant. Logan opened it to find Emma Brooks standing on his threshold, with snowflakes clinging to her scarf and eyelashes. Her cheeks were flushed a deep pink from the biting cold, and her gloved hands gripped her cane tightly. "I am so sorry." She set her breath a ghostly cloud in the frigid air. "The bus back to town broke down. Sarah said you lived nearby. I didn't know where else to go." He stepped aside without a word. "You did the right thing. Get in here before you freeze solid." She hurried inside, stamping the snow from her boots. The wall of heat from the fire washed over her face, and she let out an unconscious sigh of immense relief. "I can't believe it's this cold again," she murmured, pulling off her gloves. "Colorado likes to remind people who's in charge," Logan replied with a rare half-smile. "You're lucky you made it before the road disappeared completely." A faint smile touched Emma's lips as she turned her face toward the warmth of the crackling fire. "It smells of pine and smoke," she whispered. "And safety," he added, draping a warm blanket over her shoulders. "Here, sit. I'll put on some tea." As the kettle began to whistle, the wind rose to a shriek outside, a feral cry that hammered against the cabin's very bones. Heavy snowflakes swirled furiously, plastering themselves to the window panes until the world outside vanished into a blinding white chaos. Logan fed another log to the fire, his eyes flicking upward as the old cabin groaned, protesting the storm's initial brutal assault. Emma settled by the hearth, her fingers sinking into Buddy's thick fur as the small puppy leaned hard against her, seeking comfort. Scout laid his heavy head upon her lap, letting out a long, contented sigh that seemed to warm the very air. "They remember me," she murmured. "It's like we've known each other forever." "They never forget kindness," Logan replied, his voice low. For a time they spoke of simple things, the animal rescue center, of Sarah's boundless patience with strays and the scent of rain Emma still held in her memory, even without her sight. But the storm outside was gathering its fury. The wind howled like a living beast, and the cabin lights flickered once, twice, and then plunged them into an absolute darkness, a sudden disorienting void. "Power's out," Logan muttered, as he reached for a flashlight on the mantel. Its weak beam cut through the black, throwing long, dancing shadows. "Stay put," he told Emma. "I'm going to check the generator." "Is that safe out there?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. A faint smile touched his lips, and he used that same steady voice that had guided his team through far worse. "I've handled worse than this." He pulled on his heavy coat and took a lantern and opened the door. The storm met him like a solid wall of force. Snow whipped his face, the ice crystals stinging his exposed skin. The wind tore through the pines with a deafening roar, carrying frozen shards that felt like they could slice right through you. He forged a slow path toward the shed out back, his boots plunging deep into the rapidly forming snowdrifts. The cold was a physical presence, a predator biting through his layers, relentlessly gnawing at the edges of his endurance. He finally reached the small wooden shed, forcing the door open against the wind. The generator sat in the far corner, utterly silent. He flipped the switch. Nothing. Frozen fuel lines. Cursing under his breath, he knelt and started chipping ice away from the intake valve. The minutes stretched into an eternity. The wind shrieked with greater fury, and snow drifted high against the door, sealing him inside. When he at last cleared the line, he tried again. Still nothing. The machine was dead. He stood his breath coming in ragged bursts. His breath plumed in the faint lantern light. He could no longer feel his fingers. The core of his body was losing heat, and fast. The lantern sputtered, flickered one last time, and died. Back inside the cabin, Emma sat in the dark, just listening. She could feel the cold seeping through the cracks in the door, and hear the mournful wail of the wind outside, and a knot of pure dread twisted in her stomach. "Buddy Scout," she whispered, her fingers stroking their heads. "He's been gone way too long." The dogs whimpered softly, perfectly in tune with her rising anxiety. "Stay close to me," she commanded them. Gently pushing herself to her feet, she took a few tentative steps toward the door, her hands tracing the rough-hewn wood of the wall for guidance. "Logan," she called out, her voice trembling but infused with a new strength. "Logan, can you hear me?" Only the storm answered. She clenched her jaw, her hand finding her cane, and nudged the door open. The biting cold hit her instantly, taking her breath. "God help me," she breathed, stepping out into the storm. She chased the faint howl of wind in the trees, her boots breaking the uneven crust of snow. But before she'd gone far, a sharp, urgent bark pierced the noise. Buddy raced past her, his nose buried in the snow, Scout right on his tail. "Buddy Scout!" She screamed her words, swallowed by the wind. She scrambled after the sound of their paws, her heart pounding. After a few desperate minutes, Buddy's bark echoed again. Much closer this time. Emma lurched forward, her leg hitting something solid, a human form almost completely buried. "Logan," she gasped, collapsing to her knees. He lay face down, his coat crusted with frost, his breath dangerously shallow, but he was still there. The dogs circled him, whining, their bodies pressed tight against his sides to keep him warm. Emma's hands trembled as she shook his shoulder firmly. "Logan, please, you need to wake up." A faint groan escaped him as his eyes fluttered. "Generator. Died," he murmured through chattering teeth. "Didn't want you to freeze." "Forget the generator," she said fiercely. "I need to get you back inside." Using every ounce of her strength, she guided him toward the cabin, the dogs nudging and pushing him along from behind. The door banged open from her shoulder's force, and they stumbled into the dim, orange glow of the fading embers. She helped him to the rug by the hearth, ripping off his coat and gloves. His skin felt like ice, his lips had turned blue. "Buddy Scout, stay with him," she whispered. The two dogs immediately climbed over him, curling up against his chest and arms, their small bodies radiating vital warmth. Emma threw another blanket over the three of them, then sat beside him, cradling his frozen hand in both of hers. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered fiercely. "Not after everything you've been through." Logan's eyes cracked open, unfocused but alive. He looked up at her, really seeing her through the fog of exhaustion, and managed a faint smile. "You came out for me," he said hoarsely. "You would have done the same for me," she replied. Outside, the storm relentlessly assaulted the cabin, the wind shrieking like a predator wanting in. But inside, there was only warmth, and the comforting rhythm of the dogs' breathing, the soft hiss of the fire, the heartbeat Emma felt in Logan's frozen palm, after what felt like an eternity. She spoke again, her voice just a whisper now. "You're not alone anymore, Logan." His lips parted, but no sound came. He didn't have to speak. He just closed his eyes, feeling her hands' warmth, the weight of the dogs, and the quiet hum of life protecting him. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but inside the small cabin nestled in the woods, 3 heartbeats and a whispered promise were a fortress against the storm. Morning crept softly into Brookhaven. The light was pale, uncertain in the aftermath of the storm. Outside the hospital, the air was thick with melting snow and diesel from the plows. Inside, the world felt quiet, broken only by the steady beeping of machines and nurses murmuring in the hall. Logan Hayes awoke slowly, like a diver surfacing from the deep. First the sound, then the light, then the rush of memory. He just blinked at the ceiling. The sterile white ceiling tiles swam into a blur above him. A deep, bone-weary ache settled into his body, his hands swaddled in gauze, the sharp scent of antiseptic stinging his lungs. For a fleeting moment, a fog of confusion clouded his mind. And then it all came crashing back. The blizzard, the unforgiving frozen earth. Emma's voice, a desperate lifeline cutting through the wind. He forced his head to turn, finding her right there, a vigil at his bedside. She was bundled in a gray wool coat, her cane resting against the wall like a silent sentinel. Her wavy chestnut hair was unbound this time, cascading over her shoulders. She had drifted off in the chair, her hand still a gentle weight on his. "Emma!" He rasped the word, a struggle. His voice was like sandpaper on stone. She stirred at the sound, lifting her head slowly. "You're awake." She breathed the words, full of relief. Her voice was a smile made of sound. "You scared me." "Seems to be a habit of mine." He managed a weak grin, pulling at his lips. Her touch was gentle as she traced the lines of his fingers. "The doctor said you were lucky. A few more minutes in that cold." Her voice trailed off. "But you're here now." "How long?" he asked. 2 days, she answered. "The storm finally let up. Sarah found us in the morning. You were out cold. The generator was still dead." She'd called the ranger service. Logan let out a slow, shuddering breath, closing his eyes. "And the dogs are safe," Emma added softly. "Buddy and Scout, they never left your side all night. Sarah said she's never witnessed such loyalty. They refused to leave you until you woke up." A faint smile touched his lips. "Good soldiers." The door swung open without a sound, and Dr. Sarah Whitfield entered, her steady presence immediately calming the room. Her blonde hair was pulled back neatly, glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. In her hands a clipboard and a steaming paper cup of coffee. "Well," she began with a wry half-smile, "look who decided to join the land of the living." "Would have come sooner," Logan rasped back. "But I was enjoying the nap." Sarah let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head. "Your core temperature was below 85 degrees when we got you here. Frankly, Logan, it's a miracle you're sitting here joking at all." Her gaze softened, a rare glimpse behind the professional armor. "I'm guessing you've been through worse," she observed. "Maybe," he conceded, "but not with better company." Sarah's smile was knowing. "This town's buzzing, you know. Word travels fast. The Navy SEAL who saved 2 pups in a monster blizzard. They're calling you a hero." A slight frown creased Logan's brow. "They've got it backward, those 2. They saved me." Sarah's understanding smile lingered. She patted his arm gently. "Get some rest, hero or not. You're going to need your strength for the line of visitors headed your way." After she left, Emma turned to him once more, her sightless eyes catching the soft morning light. "How does it feel?" she asked quietly. "To be called a hero," he clarified. "Strange. It feels like they're talking about someone else." A gentle smile graced her lips. "Maybe they just see the part of you that you've forgotten how to see." He held her gaze for a long, silent moment, then gave a slow nod. "Maybe." Later that afternoon, the hallway outside his room filled with life. The distant sound of laughter, the murmur of nurses, the world was slowly spinning back into motion. The door eased open again, but it was neither Sarah nor Emma this time. A man stood there stepping inside with a heavy hesitation. He clutched a battered cap in his hands. His coat was old and worn, patched at the elbows, his boots leaving small puddles of melted snow on the tile. His face was a road map of hardship etched with lines of regret. A gray stubble clung to his jaw, and his eyes, dark brown and weary, held a deep-seated guilt, but beneath it something fragile flickered. Hope. "Mr. Hayes?" Logan asked, his voice low. Logan sat up a little straighter. "That'd be me." The man drew a breath as if steeling himself. "Name's Benny Cruz. We haven't met." But his gaze dropped to the hat he was wringing in his hands. "You found something that once belonged to me." "2 somethings, in fact." Logan's face remained a mask, but a softness crept into his voice. "Buddy and Scout." Benny nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Yeah. I never meant for it to end like that, when I left them. I just figured someone would find them right away. I told myself it was the right thing to do. But the truth is..." His voice cracked. "I was drunk and I was a coward." A heavy silence descended on the room, Outside, melting snow dripped from the hospital eaves, a slow, steady beat like the world itself was holding its breath. Logan took the measure of the man before him. The defeated slump of his shoulders, the tremor in his hands, the profound emptiness in his eyes. He recognized that look he'd seen it in men who returned from the war, but left their souls behind. "So why are you here, Benny?" he asked, his voice low. Benny swallowed the sound raw in the quiet room. "To say I'm sorry. And to tell you, you did the one thing I couldn't. You gave them a chance." He finally met Logan's gaze, his own voice unsteady. "And if you'd let me, I want to help. I have a little workshop over on Main Street. It's nothing fancy, but I could build them a proper run a doghouse. Something real. I owe 'em that much." Logan remained silent for a long moment. His hand lay still on the blanket, his fingers idly tracing the worn seam. Forgiveness had never been an easy thing for him, not for a man who carried the world on his shoulders. He'd spent years living with the ghosts of those he couldn't save. But this felt different. This was a man standing in his own truth, not hiding behind excuses. Slowly, he extended his hand. "We all get lost from time to time," he said softly. "All that matters is finding the road back." Benny just stared disbelief, warring with a profound, dawning gratitude. He took the offered hand, his grip tight, his calloused skin trembling. "Thank you," he whispered the words, thick with emotion. The hardness in Logan's eyes melted away. "Don't thank me," Logan said. "Just keep putting one foot in front of the other." When Benny finally left the room, seemed to breathe again, strangely lighter, as if an unseen weight had been lifted from the air. Logan sank back against the propped-up pillow, letting out a long, slow breath. The door creaked open again, and Emma appeared, Buddy and Scout trotting faithfully at her heels, their paws clicking on the tile. The pups immediately scrabbled up against the bed, their tails a blur of pure joy. "They couldn't wait another minute," Emma said, a warm smile on her face. "Looks like my orders to rest just got overruled," Logan chuckled, reaching down to scratch behind their ears. "Hey soldiers, mission accomplished." Emma tilted her head. "That man, the one who just left, Benny, was it? He was here to see you." "Yeah," Logan confirmed. "He's the one who left them out there." She paused for a heartbeat. "And you forgave him?" He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Someone once told me that even in the darkest of nights, we find our way back home by the light of small miracles." A knowing smile touched Emma's lips. "That sounds suspiciously like something I would say. It was," he admitted, a faint grin tugging at his mouth. Outside the hospital window, the afternoon sun finally broke free of the clouds, casting a golden glow over the snow-blanketed town. Children were running along the sidewalks, throwing snowballs, their laughter echoing like tiny bells on the crisp winter air. For the first time in years, Logan felt a deep stillness inside. The noise in his head was gone, no ghosts whispering their tired warnings from the past. There was only peace. Emma reached out her fingers, finding his. "You see?" she whispered softly. "You came back." His gaze drifted from her face to the two pups huddled beside him, their tiny forms a single warm bundle. "Yeah," he whispered. "Maybe I finally did." That year, spring arrived late in Brookhaven, tentative but with an unyielding promise. The snow clung to the rooftops, finally surrendering in a slow, rhythmic drip onto the awakening earth below. Logan Hayes stood before the house that once belonged to Benny Cruz, his sleeves rolled high, his hands marked by paint and sawdust. Where gray, weathered boards once lay, the porch now gleamed with fresh cedar, its new windows catching the first light of the morning sun. It was far from a grand estate, yet it held a warmth it had long been denied, a life that had been missing, not just from its walls, but from his own life. Just then, Buddy barked from the yard, pouncing after a drifting leaf, with Scout tumbling faithfully at his heels. They were no longer the fragile, trembling pups he'd rescued from the snow. Their black and tan coats gleamed in the sunlight, their bodies now lean and strong, their tails a constant, joyful rhythm. Logan paused, a genuine smile finally reaching the corners of his mouth as he watched them play. It still felt surreal. After everything he'd been through, he wasn't running from the world anymore, but building a small corner of it for himself. Emma Brooks emerged onto the porch, the soft tap of her cane announcing her presence. She was dressed in a simple blue cardigan and a white blouse, her rich chestnut hair woven into a loose braid. Sunlight kissed the faint freckles scattered across her pale skin, and while her eyes were still distant, unable to focus, her face held the serene awareness that had always managed to break through his defenses. "You missed a spot," she said, gesturing vaguely at an unpainted patch of wood. He chuckled. "There's no way you can see that. I can feel it." She teased, a playful grin spreading across her face. "Your silence is a dead giveaway." Shaking his head, he dipped his brush again. "Note to self, never play poker with you." Just then, behind them, the low rumble of an old pickup echoed up the dirt road. Benny Cruz emerged from the cab, moving slowly, his tattered old coat replaced by a clean flannel shirt and well-worn jeans. The lines etched into his face remained, but the hardness in his eyes had softened, no longer haunted by guilt, but illuminated with a newfound purpose. Tucking a bundle of tools under one arm, a thermos in his other hand, he called out, "You two building a palace over here?" His voice raspy but warm. "Just a home," Logan answered. "A place for second chances." Benny set his tools on the ground and stretched out his stiff back. "Well, this old place was certainly overdue for one." His eyes scanned the yard, taking in the mended fence, the freshly trimmed shrubs and the orderly rows of new kennels that now stood behind the house. You've done more in a month than I managed in 20 years. "Maybe I just had better help," Logan replied, his gaze shifting to Emma. She offered a gentle smile. "We only gave it a name. You're the one who gave it life." Logan stepped away from the porch, squinting up at the wooden sign Benny had finished carving just yesterday. It hung with a quiet pride above the gate, Faith's Haven, Animal Rescue and Rehabilitation. The letters were etched deep into the wood, their edges burned dark and smooth. "You did amazing work on this, Benny," Logan said. Benny just shrugged. "Wood gives, people they break." "Then it's a blessing we're mending both," Emma replied softly. As the afternoon wore on, the small sanctuary began to breathe with its first new souls. Sarah Whitfield rumbled up in her old Jeep carrying 3 lost souls from town, one lame one shaking, and one that warred with its own image. She offered Logan that familiar, knowing half-smile. "I told you I'd put you to work the second you were back on your feet." "Guess I had it coming," he answered. She swung down from the Jeep, her hair pulled back beneath a well-worn baseball cap. "You're building something real here, Logan. Brooke Havens has been crying out for this." "It wasn't just me," he said, his gaze finding Emma kneeling in the yard, her gentle hands calming one of the new arrivals. "It's every one of us." Sarah nodded, her eyes shifting to Benny, who hammered a new post into the earth beside the kennels. "Even him," she whispered. "Especially him," Logan affirmed. Later, as the sun bled its color behind the hills, the yard filled with a soft rhythm pause on gravel. The gentle clinking of food bowls, a quiet harmony. Buddy chasing a butterfly with joyful barks. Emma sat on the porch, absorbing the sound of laughter from the yard. "You know," she began, her voice a hush, "when my world went dark, I truly thought it had abandoned me. But I've learned I just needed to listen harder for the right voices." Logan settled beside her, stretching out his weary legs. "You found them." "So did you," she murmured back. He was quiet for a moment. The air smelled of pine and redemption. "Sometimes I feel like the Navy taught me to survive anything but the quiet," he admitted softly. "I never knew what to do with peace, until this." Emma reached out her hand, finding his. "Then maybe this is your new tour. Not about fighting, but about healing." Benny's laugh cut through the quiet as he secured the kennel gate. "These mutts eat better than me," he called. "You sure we ain't making them too soft? After everything they've been through, they've earned it." Logan replied. Benny wiped his brow, his grin fading to something gentler. You know I used to come out here every night. After they were gone, just stand by this fence listening to the wind. I couldn't escape the feeling that they were still out there somewhere, waiting for me to deserve them. I guess they were. Logan looked at him, his voice low and unwavering. They found us both, Benny. As twilight fell, the last light of the sun kissed the new wooden sign, making the carved letters glow gold for just a breath. The world grew silent, save for the steady rhythm of life returning. The crunch of paws on gravel, a woman's soft laugh, the groan of a rocking chair. And inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly. Buddy and Scout were curled on the rug by the door, their heads resting close together, their tails twitching with dreams only they could know. Emma hummed softly an old tune that was half a lullaby and half a prayer. Logan leaned in the doorway, watching her with a look of pure, quiet wonder. This sanctuary, she whispered without turning, feels like it's been waiting for us all along. Maybe it has, Logan murmured, as outside Benny struck a match and a lantern's glow bloomed near the gate, washing over the wooden sign once more. Etched beneath the name Faith's Haven was a second line he'd carved that very evening, words he had kept secret in his heart. As Logan drew nearer, he read the inscription in a hushed breath, "Where no soul is left behind." A wind whispered through the pines, unusually gentle and warm for the first time, in what felt like an eternity, carrying with it the faint symphony of life, the sound of barking of laughter, the very heartbeat of a home that had finally discovered its soul. Logan turned back to the house where Emma waited by the fire, and two devoted dogs stood watch, feeling a profound sense of rightness settle deep inside him. It was peace, not the silence of emptiness, but the deep resonance of belonging. He smiled, whispering into the cool night air, "Whiz, we're finally home." An entire year had passed since the storm, yet Brookhaven still smelled of pine and the sweet scent of redemption. The low winter sun draped itself over the hills, casting a soft golden light across the rooftops of Faith's Haven. That small wooden house, once a weary and forgotten relic, now stood with quiet pride at the clearing's edge, embraced by well-kept kennels, by the sound of laughter and the joyful echoing chorus of dogs lost in play. Snow had returned, but this time it fell softly, feeling more like a benediction than a menace. Logan Hayes stood in the center of the yard, hands buried in the pockets of his worn leather jacket. His breath plumed in the crisp air. The passing years had carved deeper lines around his eyes, but they were no longer haunted. A settled peace lived in them now, and at times a flicker of true joy. His beard was trimmed and neat, the gray within it shining more like silver than shadow. He watched as the community began to arrive for the event, a small adoption day he and Emma had dreamed up for months. The concept was simple, yet deeply beautiful to pair older dogs with older souls, offering both a second chance at the companionship they deserved. Buddy and Scout, now fully grown and regal, weaved through the guests. Buddy had matured into a powerful, self-assured German shepherd, his coat a rich black and tan, his amber eyes sharp and intelligent. Scout remained a bit smaller, with kind, gentle eyes forever as loyal as a shadow. They were never more than a few steps from Logan, living symbols of all he had fought for, lost and miraculously found again. "Logan!" Dr. Sarah Whitfield's voice cut through the air from the kennels. She was bundled in a forest green coat and a thick wool scarf, her blonde hair now streaked with more silver, but her spine as straight as ever. "Don't you just stand there looking like a philosopher. We need more hands with these tables." He let out a low chuckle. "Yes, ma'am." Not far away, Benny Cruz was setting up chairs, humming an old melody completely off-key. He'd put himself back together over the past year. His face was still rugged, but it held a new light. His stride was firmer. The bitterness that had clung to him like a shroud of smoke had finally cleared. He now wore a denim apron, the Faith's Haven logo carefully embroidered on the chest, his hands calloused from building fences and a future. His heart, once heavy, was now made light with purpose. "You sure you don't want to be the one to give the speech, Benny?" Logan asked, carrying a folding table through the snow. Benny just laughed, shaking his head with certainty. "I can barely make it through morning prayers without getting choked up. You're the one who cleans up nice for a crowd." Logan smirked. You just mean I look old enough for them to trust me?" "Exactly," Benny shot back with a wide grin. By noon, the little yard was filled to bursting. Snowflakes drifted down from the heavens as soft and quiet as feathers, while townsfolk arrived in warm coats and scarves. Elders with kind smiles etched on their faces, some leaning on canes, others guiding small walkers through the fresh powder. With personal warmth, Sarah and Emma made a point to welcome every single soul who had come. Emma was a vision in a pale beige coat, her brown hair waving at her shoulders as she moved with a grace that defied her blindness. She held herself with the serene confidence of a woman who had learned to see, not with her eyes, but with her very heart. Logan stood by the porch, his voice a steady, warm current flowing over the hushed crowd. "Just 1 year ago," he began, "I wasn't standing here. I was lost, in every possible way a man can be. I had come back from the war, but the war had refused to leave me. Then one night, in the heart of a snowstorm, I found 2 small souls fighting to stay alive behind a grocery store. They were freezing, starving, and terrified. I thought I was their savior." He paused, his gaze softening, as Buddy trotted to his side, pressing close against his leg. "But the real truth is, they saved me." The audience was captivated, the very wind seeming to fall silent as if to listen. "These 2, they reminded me of the meaning of loyalty, the feeling of trust, and they showed me that what is broken can be mended. They can heal, if only they're given love and time." A soft murmur of agreement rippled through the gathering. A few hands discreetly wiped away tears. Logan's eyes swept over the faces before him. The widows, the fellow veterans, the quiet souls who had known loneliness for far too long. "Faith's Haven is here because of them, because 2 sets of tiny paw prints led me to believe that no one, no creature, should ever be left behind." A single gentle clap broke the silence from the back, and soon the yard was filled with heartfelt applause. Buddy let out one sharp, proud bark, an echo that brought a ripple of laughter. Scout's tail wagged with such ferocity he nearly stumbled over. Then Emma moved forward, placing her hand gently on Logan's arm. "Before we begin the adoptions," she said softly, "I'd like to share something with you all." She turned her face toward the small wooden stage Benny had crafted beneath the ancient maple, her tranquil voice carrying on the crisp winter air. "When I lost my sight, I believed my entire world had gone dark. But then I met people who showed me that light isn't only something you see. It's something you feel deep inside. Today we celebrate that light." And then her voice rose in song. It began as a fragile whisper, a trembling thread of melody that grew into a powerful current with every word. "Amazing grace. Oh, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." The music drifted through the yard, like the first sunbeam piercing morning fog. Even the dogs grew still, their tails wagging in a gentle hypnotic rhythm. Near the kennels, Sarah felt her eyes begin to mist over. Benny turned away discreetly, wiping a tear with his sleeve. Logan watched Emma, a profound tightness gripping his chest. She wasn't singing from memory. She was singing from the depths of her faith. Every note was a vessel for gratitude, forgiveness, and love. As her last note faded, the snow began to fall once more. Slow, impossibly bright flakes shimmering in the air like 1,000 tiny blessings. The crowd was held in a reverent hush for a long moment before finally breaking into thunderous applause. Logan moved to her side, taking her hand in his thumb gently tracing the back of her palm. "That was perfect," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I wasn't singing for perfection," she replied with a gentle smile. "I was singing for peace, As the afternoon warmed the quiet, reverence gave way to joyful laughter as older couples departed hand in hand with their new devoted companions. Silver-muzzled dogs with tails beating a rhythm of pure joy, their eyes brimming with absolute trust. One woman simply wept, clutching an old Labrador to her heart. Another veteran dropped to one knee beside a shepherd mix, whispering a solemn vow, "We'll watch over each other now." By late afternoon, the snow had deepened, transforming the yard into a soft, tranquil dreamscape of white. Benny sat by the porch rail, a blanket pulled tight around him, watching the last new family leave. His smile was faint, but it held the weight of a mission fulfilled. "Would you just look at that?" he whispered in awe. "A whole lifetime of miracles in just one day." Logan sat beside him, his silent nod saying everything. "You were the heart of it, old man." Benny chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "Goes to show God hasn't forgotten how to use his broken tools." When the last car had gone, the three of them, Logan, Emma, and Benny, lingered on the porch, basking in the quiet aftermath. Their eyes followed Buddy and Scout, two blurs of joy, chasing through the falling flakes as the sunset cast a slow, golden glow over the landscape. The light reached out, illuminating the simple wooden sign by the gate, Faith's Haven, where no soul is left behind. Emma rested her head on Logan's shoulder. "Can you hear that?" she whispered. "The dogs?" he asked gently. "No," she said, her voice soft. "The sound of peace?" Buddy and Scout, their energy finally spent, curled up together by the porch steps, their bodies huddled close against the encroaching cold. Logan gently slipped his hand into Emma's, the last rays of sun catching her wedding band. A small, simple circle that glittered like a promise of hope itself. The snow fell on a quiet and unending curtain, wrapping Faith's Haven in a blanket of silver light. And in that singular suspended moment, balanced between laughter and silence, between forgiveness and faith, the world felt as though it had been pieced back together again. It was proof that even in the coldest of winters, miracles still choose to bloom in the broken places. Sometimes a miracle doesn't arrive with a clap of thunder or a flash of light. They come quietly, written in paw prints across a field of snow. This story is a testament to how the divine so often works through the smallest acts of kindness, through the lives of the fragile and forgotten, leading us back to ourselves when we have lost our way. In a world where pain and loneliness can build walls around the heart, it's the gentle touch of love, a rescued soul, a word of forgiveness, a quiet moment of grace that reminds us to believe in something greater than ourselves. If you believe miracles still happen every day, share this story with someone in your life who needs to feel that hope. Let us know where this story reached you by leaving a comment below. And please don't forget to subscribe for more stories that shine a light on the quiet miracles happening all around us every single day. May you and everyone you hold dear be blessed with warmth, enduring faith, and the courage to see the small miracles waiting just beyond your own front door.